Phases of the menstrual cycle. Would you like to know about the phases of the menstrual cycle and recognize which phase occurs at what points throughout your menstrual cycle and the ideal lengths of each phase, which illustrates a healthy menstrual cycle? So let's talk about this today. Hello, I am so thrilled to be here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Michelle Cooke, period and hormone naturopath, natural fertility educator, and emotion release technique practitioner or ERT practitioner. I help women struggling with their menstrual cycles have easy, pain-free periods, balanced hormones, and emotional well-being. And I am the founder and director of Reproductive Wellness, and I see patients both online and face to face. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to pop them in the comments box down below for me, and I'll be very happy to answer those for you. What is the menstrual cycle? So, in a female who is still getting her period, a menstrual cycle roughly takes place each month, approximately, for most women. So, of each phase of the menstrual cycle, there are fluctuations in hormone production. There's physical changes such as the buildup and the breakdown of the endometrial lining, which is essentially the lining of the uterus, along with maturation and development of your oocytes or your eggs, where a dominant follicle then will actually release an egg during ovulation. So, what sort of signifies a menstrual cycle? So, a menstrual cycle typically begins on day one of your period, and that's an actual full bleed, okay? Spotting or a light bleed do not count. It's that full healthy bleed that we're looking for to be day number one. And it finishes the day before your next period. So that's what a menstrual cycle is, okay? So from day one to your period, finishing a day before your next period or day one. So, although a textbook definition of a woman's menstrual cycle is 28 days, this is not always typical for every woman. So, a normal menstrual cycle can vary in length, and it can be anywhere from 27 days to 35 days in length. And this is still considered to be perfectly fine and normal. So, within the menstrual cycle, there are 4 phases. Just had to make sure I had the right number of fingers there. So, there's 4 phases. So, there's the menstrual phase, there's the follicular phase, there's the ovulatory phase, and there's the luteal phase as well. But also, it's important to remember alongside these 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, there's also 2 cycles that are happening within this menstrual cycle as well. So there's the ovarian cycle, which is occurring within the ovary. And the phases included here are the follicular phase, ovulation or the ovulatory phase, and the luteal phase. The second type of cycle is an endometrial cycle. So that's what's occurring within the endometrium or the lining of the uterus. So the phases here included are the menstrual phase, which is essentially your period, the proliferative phase, and the secretory phase. So we'll discuss more about those phases as we go through this recorded video today, okay? The 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. So the first phase of the menstrual cycle is the menstrual phase, or AKA your period, okay? So this is part of the endometrial cycle. Remember, there's 2 different cycles. So this is part of the endometrial cycle, which is occurring in the lining of your uterus. So, this is when you have a vaginal bleed, otherwise referred to as your period or that time of the month. A lot of people use that phrase. There's lots of different names that people call their period, but that's just one of them. So, it is when the lining of your uterus is actually shed to reset the body. It's important to remember that your period is not just made up of blood, it's also made up of tissues, so the endometrial lining and other secretions as well. Now, normal period lengths are 4 to 7 days, with 3 to 5 days also being an acceptable length as well. Anything shorter or longer is not normal, okay? So, a normal blood loss, just so you know, is 30 to 40 milliliters, and that's over the whole duration of your period, with an upper limit of 60 to 80 milliliters. Okay, so that's sort of the upper end, but anything over 80 milliliters is considered to be a heavy bleed. Okay. Follicular phase. So, this is part of the ovarian cycle. So, this is taking place within the ovary. So, this stage of the menstrual cycle actually starts on day 1 of your period up until ovulation. So, during this phase, many follicles, so these are little sacs filled with fluid that contain your eggs, okay? So, they're developing. And there's only one that's actually chosen to be that fully matured dominant follicle. So the egg inside, otherwise known as the oocyte, develops and matures too. So within this phase is also the proliferative phase. Remember, there's these other phases that are occurring within this as well. So this starts after your period and continues until ovulation. And this is part of the endometrial cycle. So, in this phase, the lining of the uterus starts to thicken in preparation for the potential egg implantation. And that's if fertilization actually takes place with the sperm. So, this is actually encouraged to happen due to those rising estrogen levels. That's what helps build up that endometrial lining. Ovulatory phase or ovulation. So, this is part of the ovarian cycle and it's taking place in the ovary. And this typically occurs about midway through the menstrual cycle. However, there are times when ovulation can be delayed. Okay, so things like stress, PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome, weight loss, weight gain, not eating enough, exercising too intensely, and things like that can delay ovulation. So it might be occurring a little bit later than expected. Also, if you have a longer menstrual cycle, which can be typical in PCOS, by the way, ovulation will generally take place later on in the cycle. It's not usually in the midway point. So, in this phase, this is when the ovum or the egg has finally reached maturation. So, the mature follicle is known as the Graafian follicle, which actually swells and then it bursts to release that ovum or egg into the abdominal cavity. So the ovum is then taken up by the fimbriae, which are finger-like structures that are located at the end of the fallopian tube, sorry. So they're sort of like finger-like structures. And so that, they take up the ovum or the egg, and then it makes its way down the fallopian tube where it waits, where it's waiting to meet a sperm or a spermatozoa. So the proliferative phase is actually still happening during this time, during this ovulatory phase. So remember, that's the thickening of the uterine lining to make a nice plump and desirable spot for the implantation of the egg, if the sperm actually fertilizes the egg, that is. So the final phase of the menstrual cycle is the luteal phase. So this is part of the ovarian cycle. So it's actually occurring in the ovary. And this phase actually starts the day after ovulation up until the day before your next period. So the luteal phase is generally approximately about 2 weeks in duration. And during this time, progesterone is being produced by the sac that's left behind after that ovum's been ovulated and released during ovulation. So remember, this sac or follicle was previously known as an ovarian follicle, but now it has the new name of corpus luteum, which in Latin means yellow body. If the egg or ovum is fertilized, it then makes its journey down to the uterus, okay? And it implants in the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus. So the ovum will actually produce, so remember, ovum is the egg, it will produce HCG, which is human chorionic gonadotrophin, and this will cause that corpus luteum to continue to secrete progesterone. And progesterone actually has 3 different roles here. So, number one is to maintain the thickness of that uterine lining. Number two is to prevent your period because it wants to sustain that pregnancy. And number three is preventing miscarriage. So, having good, healthy progesterone is a really important factor towards miscarriage prevention. There's many others as well, but that is a big one. So, if your ovum or egg wasn't fertilized by a sperm, the corpus luteum then degenerates. So, therefore, progesterone will start to drop because it's no longer producing this hormone. And this corpus luteum undergoes a bit of a transformation into um, connective tissue and scar tissue. And it actually has a name change as well. So the new name is called Corpus albicans, which in Latin means white body. So progesterone is no longer there to maintain the endometrial thickness, so that thickness of the uterine lining. So the lining then sheds. So this is when your period is happening. And then the new menstrual cycle starts again. So then a fresh one starts up after that. And it just keeps on, the process repeats each time you have a menstrual cycle. The secretory phase actually takes place during this phase too. So this is part of the endometrial cycle. So as mentioned above, progesterone is secreted by the corpus luteum or the yellow body, and it's encouraging that endometrium or the uterine lining to thicken, and it becomes nutrient dense, it becomes glycogen rich, and arteries start to develop too in preparation for that implantation of that potential fertilized egg. So, in summary, that is all the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, which, as we know now, is the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, the ovulatory phase, and the luteal phase. And remember, within that menstrual cycle, we have 2 cycles that are happening concurrently within that, which is the ovarian cycle and the endometrial cycle. So that is all the different phases that we discussed today that are part of the menstrual cycle that have been broken down for you. So just remember, a period or menstrual cycle tracking app is great for documentation purposes, but at the end of the day, it's not reliable to use that information to determine when ovulation actually took place and how long each of those phases are. So, the best way to do this is actually to chart your menstrual cycle using the temperature method along with the cervical mucus method. They must be used together for accuracy and to actually chart your cycle properly. So, if you would actually like support with charting your menstrual cycle, whether it be for conception attempts or as a form of contraception, or perhaps you want to gain more of a deeper understanding into your menstrual cycle and have a sense of empowerment about your body, I would love to help you. I'm actually trained as a natural fertility educator, which is basically a menstrual cycle coach. Okay. So go ahead and make an appointment. I would love to educate you on that. It's one of my big passions, and it's something that I do with every woman that comes to see me. But yeah, I would love to help you with that and get that sense of empowerment. You learn so much about your body when you do this. So, if you are watching on YouTube, there's actually a link in the description to make a booking. So, go ahead there. If you're watching on my website blog, there is just click on the button below. I've popped a button there for you. And FYI, I will be uploading a video every single week. So I do aim to try and have this uploaded on a Wednesday, and I will be talking about all things women's hormones and health, periods, hormones, and menstrual cycles. So make sure that you stay tuned for the next video. And thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on my YouTube channel, be sure to like and subscribe, and also hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any future videos as well. Well, it's been a joy to talk to you today, and I hope that you have a really good day or night wherever you're based. Thank you so much. Bye.